Awesome. Thank you so much, Seth. And that free ticket sounds awesome. You can probably parlay that into a trip to Disney World if you're really ambitious. So it's like market research and Disney World together. I don't know if it gets any better than that. So we're talking about a really exciting topic today. Just to give you an overview on what the session's about, and then we'll introduce our panel. We're really talking about how we can transition from being kind of functional support staff, really, diving into the minutia of research, and how organizations can transition to being like an actual pivotal partner for their organizations that they work at. So it's going from tacticians to strategists. We're really excited to talk through this conversation today. I'm going to mostly moderate, and I have an awesome panel here with me. And I'm just going to go around the horn and have our group introduce themselves. So, Joe, do you mind introducing yourself first, and then we'll move on to Soumya and Elias.
Sure. Thanks very much, Rick. Nice to speak with everybody. Joe Rini. I'm from Market Logic Software. So we are actually a software platform that serves the insights community. We work with some of the largest companies in the world's insights teams, providing them with a platform to manage their knowledge and insights. So I'm not directly from the insights space per se, but I'm interacting with insight professionals across these organizations on a daily basis. I've been in a product role at Market Logic for a number of years, and previously in several other years, about 10 years in the space. So great to be here, and looking forward to this.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. Soumya, over to you.
Hi, thank you for having us here today, and thank you for joining the event as well. I'm Soumya. I lead the Consumer Insight Center of Excellence for Kerry. We're a food, beverage, flavors, ingredients, all things nice and sweet at Kerry here. I've been at the industry at Kerry for over a decade now, prior to which I come from the Kantar world of agency side research. So I like to straddle the both. We've been doing a lot of research in the food and beverage space, purely from uncovering new innovations, new ideas on foods, flavors, your next menu item and your next food product that you're searching on the shelves. That's what we do. We pride ourselves in the outside in consumer story. Thanks for having me, and looking forward to the session.
Awesome. Thank you. Elias, over to you.
Hey, everyone. Elias Susu. I lead insights for FGX. We're a division of EssilorLuxottica. We are in the eyewear business, and this is my 11th year at the company. I'm, somewhat of a one-person team at FGX, but have connectivity with a larger team at EssilorLuxottica in the research department. Prior to that, I've had a bit of a mix of different experiences. So I started after college on the agency account management side, working on classical CPG brands like J&J and P&G. And then I worked in strategy consulting after business school. So, the benefit of all that is it's given me a range of different experiences and perspectives, and that broader business lens in terms of the stakeholders that I work with. So I think that's been a great benefit as well.
Awesome. And Elias, I think we determined in our warm-up session a couple weeks ago that you have to wear glasses if you work at Luxottica, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, there we go. Well, good stuff. Again, thank you all for being here. So, one of the things that, we often hear, anecdotally and in real world is that research professionals sometimes have a challenge in transitioning from, being executing research, going out and order taking, and transitioning to having like an actual seat at the table and influencing business decisions. This is borne out in dozens of conversations I've had with, actual practitioners inside organizations. But there's also a substantial amount of data around this too. And maybe to frame up some of the conversation, I'll cite a study, a research report done by a Boston Consulting Group a few years ago called the Introverted Corporation. In this report, they found that among many top global executives, that insights or customer-led decision-making was one of the top 2 priorities for organizations or for leaders of organizations. However, only 13% rated their satisfaction with their insights function as highly satisfied. So there's a big gap between what organizations want and the actual satisfaction with that need. I think that what we're talking about today is really about how to elevate the role of insights inside an organization. And maybe we can come through and we'll start off with a question here. And Elias, I might just come straight back to you, is that we say that insights is really cited and that BCG study highlights that this is a top priority. What's the actual challenge in making the transition from very tactical support to strategic partner? Maybe give us kind of a big, kind of weighty answer. And Selmy, I'll kick it over to you as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be challenging at times to be immersed in our roles as researchers, but really make sure that we're delivering value and connecting with partners from a strategic point of view as well. And so I think that piece of it is super important because there's a lot of time that goes into it. And it's important to spend that time on both ends. So before, both before and after the research, right? So I think those stages are just as important, if not more important than the research itself. So the planning that goes into it, the alignment with the stakeholders, creating that strategic vision and purpose for the research. And then after the research, making sure that we're really distilling the insights into the key points and actions that are going to make a difference and an impact for the business. So I think, really making sure that we're focused as much on those pieces of the puzzle is super important. And I think sometimes that takes us out of our comfort zone, right? Because it's easy to get caught up in making sure that we're planning and delivering and executing the research itself. But that handoff and helping to make sure that there's not just sort of a understanding of the research, but a clear, vision in terms of how we're going to use it and next steps and actions, I think is so important.
Yeah, super, super useful. Selmy, what's your take on this?
I agree with Elias. I think that is definitely key. I'd just like to bring up two specific pieces. Is one, for us to move from a transactional, right, day-to-day opportunity sizing, test this concept, is that, product viability. I think it's important for the composition of the team to also have that diverse group of team members. Some of us are researchers. We love to get into the weeds of things, and you need those within the insights community. But your team from a global, regional, local basis has to be diverse enough to support those strategic conversations and to be able to take you from the weeds and the interesting nuggets and the aha moments all the way to translating it to the business and understanding the strategic growth pillars, understanding, what areas of opportunities you could unlock for a business overall. So I think we also need to enable our resource team a certain way with the skills and the capabilities to be able to support a transactional to a strategic partner journey altogether. And I think, constantly, like the Gartner piece comes to mind, and Rick, the BCG piece is very crucial for us to read through as well. But it makes you think, what is your research life cycle? Are you diagnostic in your services that you provide to the teams? Or are you going from a diagnostic all the way to a predictive foresight, platform? So I think it depends on how you craft your function and your toolbox and your toolkit to unlock that strategic value. And these seem very specific, tangible aspects that you can invest in. So no matter what maturity your insights function is at, to enable your resource team as well as your offering is very important in this space as well.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Elias.
No, I was just going to say, and Rick, I think in the prep session, we talked a little bit about the connecting back to the strategic pillars of the business, right? So I think and I think that's a way to really make sure that everything is aligned from a growth pillar perspective. And I think that makes everything that comes afterwards a lot easier in terms of the alignment and the purpose. So, I think, that part is, again, that's the before part, but really creating that vision of how it's supporting the overall growth pillars and the work that, frankly, the whole organization is working towards. So.
Yeah, I think, and Joe, I'll jump to you in a moment here, but I think what I'm hearing from both of you is like, it's really about moving away from like the minutia of the day-to-day research and actually connecting like insights to outcomes and the business outcomes and being able to be in front of the business rather than kind of riding the tails of the business, right? It's the difference between order taking and taking a very strategic lens. And Joe, I think that you have a really unique perspective here because Salmia and Elias are sitting in the business, actual practitioners here. You're looking at with a really broad lens and seeing how organizations are making this change. What do you see as like the challenges that these organizations go through? Like what prevents that from working well?
Yeah, right. So, I mean, echoing a lot of what's been said, we're working with some of the 100 largest global customers. We're also seeing a lot of RFPs from either large or mid-sized companies looking to implement something to help their insights teams. And something that's consistent, to echo what was in that article you referenced, is it's about moving beyond that minutia to getting insights a seat at the table, right? So really not just being there to serve questions from stakeholders, from marketing or R&D, and just serve up what the latest report said or execute some research around that, but starting to synthesize that and come back with sort of proactive recommendations, either at the product or market level, but also at a strategic level. And what's interesting there is this is not just coming from the insights mid-level, senior level insights VPs. This is coming from the the top of these organizations, even above the insights sort of team, that push to enable insights to also be really a significant player within the organizations.
Yeah, I like that. That it's the push, not pull, right? So you're pushing into the organization rather than kind of sitting back.
Right.
Well, it's super useful. And by the way, I think that this is even more important as a lot of like kind of traditional research processes continue to get kind of automated through the use of technology, that being a strategic consultant or almost an internal business consultant is even more important than before. But making that transition can be really challenging, right? So you go from like tactician, or you introduce a new organization where you perceived as a tactician or executing on a tactical level. And Elias, I'd love to start with you on your perspective here, because you're kind of a one-man show within your role here. How do you move from being an executor to being that kind of consultant within the organization?
Yeah, I think it can be definitely very challenging at times. I think there's a few ways that I think about it, right? So I think one is really, and it kind of comes back to creating those discussions beforehand, finding the the strategic partners within the organization that really support insights and working closely with them. I think at the start of the project, making sure it kind of goes back to the whole idea of being a consultant, right? So I think when you're working on the brief, make it collaborative, right? So I think it doesn't always work well when you're doing it yourself. It doesn't always work well when the stakeholder is doing it themselves. So I think when it is a collaborative process, and you're really starting with the why, the business question of why, what is the need, but more importantly, how are we going to use the research, and even taking it a step further, what decisions are going to be made based on this, right? So I think kind of forcing those tough questions on the stakeholders and having a strategic discussion around that, I think really kind of helps. In my role, I think to kind of play both, the strategic partner side of it as well as the tactician, because once I have clarity and alignment in terms of those key questions, of those key business questions, then I think everything that comes after becomes easier. And then at the reporting stage, right, you want to really make sure that at that executive level summary, that you're tying back to those, those key points and questions that were identified in the brief, right? What decisions are going to be made based on this? How are we going to use this? And that, I think that just really simplifies, the points that are actionable and that, we're trying to work towards from an outcome perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And Salmi, maybe just to kind of dovetail onto that, a question for you is, what have you seen as an effective way to build that trust and partnerships with stakeholders? I think Elias did a great job outlining the process and everything. What have you seen from your perspective?
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective of thinking of them as stakeholders. And I think what we consider internally is they're our customers. Are they using your insights? Are they not using your insights? How are they using your insights? To me, everyone's a customer, whether they're internal and then presenting on to their clients and their customers onwards. But unlocking this kind of customer mentality means that we need to make them feel like they're the champions at the end of the day. It's not just stakeholders, but they're not just accountable, but also do we make them look good in their briefing stages, right? They might not remember the research a couple of months after, but they'll remember how we made them feel. So for us, it's from a customer perspective. For us to reach that stage, however, we have to also embrace being okay, being transactional in some cases. And I think you need to think about being transactional in certain aspects because you have these heavy hitter strategic vision, right? Pieces of research. And I think I just want to make sure that we demarcate that a little bit. It's all right to be transactional. You might be in the weeds of a subject, somebody asks you for data, and that's pretty much it. But that's the association then with that relationship. However, we put our eggs in the big pieces of research basket. So similarly, Elias, we have a lot of broad scoping, exploratory, visionary studies where we are studying strategic pillars, right? Like our focus areas in the next 5 years. And I think it's a beauty in that is embracing that dual role. I know the whole topic is going from support staff to pivotal partner. The reality of it is many of them are still going to think about us as being support staff, and that's all right. The way we're cracking through, however, is getting this one piece of research and showing them everything, right? From the Toyotas to the Cadillacs, all the way to the Teslas. Like, let's show you our toolbox in action. I think then we not just inform and educate, but I think we eliminate this fear sometimes associated with research. There's this idea of like, oh gosh, it's going to take 6 months, or oh gosh, it's going to take 6 weeks. And that's not reality anymore. We're doing things faster. For the folks who are embracing technology, we're doing, pieces of research at a rapid timeline. And sometimes it just is having this conversation with a non-insights promoter. Elias, in your point, I think we have these insights, drivers in the organization, but it's also trying to identify one other person and advertise to that customer and say, here's what you already have. So like a, library approach might help them as well, Rick. So it's a lot of different points, but I think at the heart of it, they're our customer and how do we unlock or advertise to them?
Yeah, I think like I would almost summarize what you just said if I did put it in one sentence is that there's no replacement for just doing excellent work, right? And so if you're doing excellent work, fulfilling stakeholder needs, then you earn trust, and that trust, then parlays into larger conversations and more access and more influence within an organization, right? Yeah. Maybe building upon like that trust, once you're executing at a really great level. Joe, I'm going to flip this over to you. Let's talk about like the actual practice and maybe like the tactics for actually elevating insights. Is from your vantage point, what have you seen as like, potentially innovative practices for communicating across the organization?
Yeah, sure. It's a good question. So, I mean, as a tech platform, we have a couple of offerings that are really good at doing that. So we're facilitating the research in our platform, but then we also offer insights professionals a lot of tools so that they can build out kind of longer standing assets than just that given research output. So a one-off research project, and try to turn that into something that can sit there for 6 months, be refreshed, but somewhere that business stakeholders, marketers can be pointed to go source information and so on. And just sort of flipping back on what Samya spoke about, I think that what I see is a wide spectrum of insights teams. So we'll have teams that are really focused on sort of that negotiation with the marketer or with the business stakeholder on a given piece of research. But we might have other teams or companies where there's a stronger focus on data analytics or sort of recurring data sources coming in. So not just those ad hoc studies. And that's where the insights teams really are experts at being able to work across those different types of research or data and turning them into insights. And I think insights teams have a unique position within companies that other teams don't, and thus they can make that sort of cross source or cross data type analysis and then either push it out to business users, as I've said, or build out longer standing assets that business users can come to get informed. I think that's something that's important.
Yeah, so it's applying like new innovations and new ways of looking at things. Because you ultimately you're looking at the same charts every year for 20 years. It's hard to it's hard not to let your eyes go blurry, right? I
Yeah.
think it's a great point. Maybe a quick shifting gears. There's this paper I read a few years ago. It actually came from like 1982. Is these researchers who studied what makes and they studied the diffusion of insights within an organization. And one of the things that they found was that the diffusion of insights in an organization is highly dependent on the political acceptability of an insight within the organization. So stakeholders don't like that. If they don't like the insight that comes back, they have a tendency to reject it, even if it's true, right? I'm really curious, Elias, Salmia, Joe. Like I know that intuitively that this is sometimes true. How do you manage that? That's a big question, right? Salmia, let's start with you.
Oh, wow. Case studies after case studies of pieces of research that sit on the shelf because they didn't support the sales story. And they still happen, right? There's a concept or a product. If it doesn't fit the consumer, we shift gears to, is there another consumer? Is there another customer? I mean, there are millions of examples that way, but one particularly comes to mind, which was pivotal for us in terms of how we think. We started not thinking about projects as ad hoc. And let me clarify what I mean by that. While we run tactical ad hoc projects, the lifespan or the shelf life of that project is not limited just to that brief. I will also say there is no perfect brief out there. No matter what anybody says, it's never a perfect brief. It changes, it evolves. But for us to unlock beyond the brief ability for that research to survive, that's how we felt, that there is more ROI, there's more bang for your buck for that research. So if, for instance, you're studying, the taste preferences of a consumer, it is important for us to think about the outcome of not just how to support a flavor story or a product story, or how do I make this energy drink, more appealing to consumers, but it's also what other teams can use that piece of research that we think of even during briefing stage. So it might be one stakeholder that came to you and said, hey, this is what I need out of your piece of research. Well, we love piggybacking on them to make sure that there is lifetime value of that piece of research. Now, I don't mean like 5 years later, but at least have more than one primary objective that it is supporting. So that's made us feel a lot more motivated as an insights function as well, that, hey, this is not just a, one and done type of piece of research, but there is more extension of stories that it could deliver. And that means not just more products that it could, not tactical solutions that it could be applied to, but we also think about it from a business perspective. Okay, great, this concept doesn't work, but this could be applied for future mergers, acquisitions, other business development questions. So while we always think about the end consumer and the end customer, we also think about how can this influence the business, and that increases the lifetime value of your research. It makes us feel better.
Yeah. So it's extending the half-life of data, right? By actually taking a bigger picture look. So it's not just executing an individual thing, you're looking at the bigger picture. I think that's a recurring theme, is looking at the big picture, not just the individual item as well.
And if I may, Rick, just Joe mentioned technology is just so important, and visualizing it is very important. And I think the way we have, oh my gosh, there's this book I was reading on attention spans at organizations. People are not joining hour-long insight, sessions and webinars as much, especially when you're running at every piece of research. So we've been trying to look at it from a visual dashboard basis. So Joe, like the solution of visual dashboards, you don't have to have a presentation. Attention spans have gone down from 2.5 minutes in 2004. There's a book written by Gloria Mark, and she talks about how it's now reduced down in the last 5 years to 47 seconds. So you're going from 2.5 minutes to 47 seconds. And it might not be me. I still love reading books and flipping the pages, but that's your organization. And how do we appeal to them? And that's why we're kind of cutting down the PowerPoints. let's take out the, somewhere stored in a SharePoint or a Teams folder, but visualize your piece so that it's always available to when the stakeholder is going to need that piece of research. It might be 2 a.m. in the night. It might be, 6 a.m. in the morning. But if it's a dashboard, they have access to it at any piece of time if they wanted to craft a different story out of it. And that's very important. I did like, Joe, what you mentioned, and that is very tactical in the way we approach insights.
Yeah, go for it, Joe.
Yeah, okay, you saw that on you. Yeah, just to echo that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one very nice use case, we're working with the world's, or one of the world's biggest furniture stores, let's put it that way. And they have a very strong focus within the organization and the insights team to move towards database, dashboard-based self-service of data and insights. So store managers, business stakeholders, marketers are going directly to dashboards and sourcing the KPIs that are relevant to them and acting on them directly. The insights function is, of course, there to serve higher level strategy questions and so on, but really enabling across the organization that they can go self-serve those data points at least. They don't need a PowerPoint deck where someone calls out what's in the dashboard that they can go look at, right? They can do that on their phone, or they can do that on their own time, as you said. And that itself alleviates that minutia level work on the insights team, who can now be working on the higher level strategic kind of insights and so on.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's a good
thing. And hopefully they pay you in Swedish meatballs, Joe, to get that together. Well, Elias, maybe shifting over to you. So again, going back to you have the political acceptability of an idea or an insight that you've worked hard on, and that's a determinant of whether it was accepted or not. How do you manage that relationship? You have a top sales leader, they just say, no, we don't like this. No, we don't want to do it. How do you still maintain influence and gain trust out of those conversations?
Yeah, I think that is a challenge, and I think we all face that. I think sometimes you find that insight you get really excited about, and how do you make sure that gets translated in the right way, right? So I think sometimes it starts with the fact is, I think the insight is one piece of it, right? So there's a lot of other pieces that goes into it. Some of those are internal considerations, some of them are external. But we need to look at it not in a vacuum in terms of this is it, this is the story, we need to kind of move forward with this, but what are those other factors and considerations? And I think a lot of that starts with empathy in terms of really understanding the points of view of the stakeholders that you're working with, and really, putting yourself in their shoes in terms of, do they understand clearly the insight and the implications, but what are the other factors? There may be something that's kind of going against, a reason for moving forward with it. I think sometimes it's not necessarily stated or explicit in terms of them rejecting it, but more that, maybe it sits on a shelf, as Sumya said. So maybe it's maybe the function isn't, organizationally ready from a timing perspective to execute that on the insight. So I think there's a lot of different factors, but I think it's kind of taking a step back and really looking at that bigger picture to understand what are those other levers or factors, and how, if there is a kind of like a reason to kind of keep it moving forward, then how do you influence the conversation? And I think that kind of goes into the soft skills territory of really kind of working closely with your stakeholders, and empathy and listening and that sort of thing. But definitely not easy. I think it happens more often than not. And but again, I think it starts with just really that relationship that you build with your cross-functional partners.
Yeah, so Elias, that's a really great diplomatic answer. I'm gonna press you a little bit on this. So what happens when you have really high conviction about something that the organization is pushing back on? So there's soft skills, there's management. What's your recommendation for people who have very high conviction about a mistake or an opportunity that's going to be missed, backed by data, but for some reason the organization's missing it? How do you manage that?
Yeah, I think not easily, right? So, but I think you kind of need to kind of make sure again that the story is clear and that, you're communicating it the right way. So, if you've done all that, then great. I think, make sure that you're getting it in front of the right audience and approaching it the right way. So I think, don't give up, be persistent about it. And I think that's probably the most important thing, right? If you feel like there's something that needs to kind of move forward or to get more attention in terms of, hey, we have this great insight, we're not doing anything with it, then it certainly is it's on both sides, but I think it's super important to really just make sure that you're persistent about it and getting it in front of that audience, that those decision makers and so forth. So I don't know if that answers your
Yeah,
question, but
I think that's a great answer. Soumya, anything to add there before we move on to the next question?
I'm going to give you an example of how it has helped us.
Yeah.
You know how we talk about research briefs all the time, or briefs of business briefs and so on. We try to chase right to the story at the start of it. I don't know what you would use. You use an SCQA, you use a storyline in fashion, but we ask our stakeholder to finish the SCQA to begin with, assuming that whatever pieces of research they already have. So it helps us really understand, that's the story you want to deliver. That's the data point you want, because it sometimes comes down to, I need a data point on this to support. But uncovering that SCQA and having, that story develop and the script develop, that has been beautiful to work with stakeholders that are not necessarily aligned with your insights vision. Right. So and I think it's a big learning too, if they don't feel like that data point works for them and their story, that's learning too for the next time. And we don't stop. Sometimes it's our piece of research that might not support, but we have so many vendor partners as well, right? Like out in the space. And maybe our research didn't directly help that SCQA or that storyline, but how can we use everything else to make them still feel like, hey, trust me, trust your insights person, trust, that we will help you uncover that story and we won't just let you go because the research didn't work. Often than not, we see they don't like the research and then they go off chasing something else. But we help through that process as well because we are all in it together. And that has really helped with partners who are not necessarily bought into the research deliverable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And I think this kind of echoes the theme of like excellent work begets excellent work. And so providing excellence and really sharing the load between yourself and the business partners, you're not operating in a silo. That is really fundamental to maintaining influence, even when there's disagreement, right? And I think I heard that from both you and from Elias. So super helpful. Maybe a question here. So our audience is composed of a couple different constituents. One, we have research practitioners who are living inside the business, and then we also have research providers. So on the research provider side, like I'm sure there's something that they all want to know is how, as a practitioner of insights, do you feel like technology selection or partner selection impacts your ability to have influence inside an organization? That's a big question. And maybe Elias, I can start with you.
sorry, Rick, can you rephrase the question?
Yeah.
Restate.
So the question is, does vendor and partner selection for the way that you deliver insights into the organization, does that impact your ability to be a strategic partner?
I mean, I think it does for sure. I think, it's important to find the right strategic partner that's going to deliver that the value in terms of not just here's what the research said, but here's the implications. And I think that's, not sort of a given with any supplier that you select, so that process of the scoping and understanding their approach and the thought process behind it, and what the deliverables and outcome will look like, I think is super important. Is there going to be just a report, or is it going to be kind of like is there going to be like maybe a workshop that would be helpful as a part of a piece of the puzzle? Maybe not, right? But making sure that you have that comfort level in terms of the insights are going to kind of be strategic and easy to understand for the broader organization.
Super useful. Salmia, how about you?
I think extremely useful is the use of a vendor who can go beyond that initial deliverable, Rick. Just having the right partner, whether they are data partners, analytical partners, or research full suite partners, extremely important, at least within my universe, because we're servicing all countries around the globe, right? We're servicing, from China to Japan to Brazil to all over, and they have their own unique set of partners they trust and that are even available, to be honest, within that geography. So extremely crucial to really move from that support staff to the pivotal partner. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck kind of pulling out, sales data and point of sale information for them and not really the story. So for us, partner relationship is extremely important. In fact, we actually take a month out of every other year to just go through discovery of vendors. So does that for us, it's no longer a phase 1, phase 2 approach of running a workshop, like do the research on the workshop. It has to come hand in hand, because if you're a vendor who wants to increase your lifetime value at our end, it just comes hand in hand. The more you have conversations beyond the insights function and probably workshop beyond the insights function with their stakeholders, is very important. So, when I see vendors with full suite research and they say, do you want a workshop? Don't you want a workshop? I think it's very important that you push for it, because maybe your insights team is thinking about support staff, try to unlock value for them and say, you don't need to do this. We'll run the workshop so that you have that unbiased opinion coming through from an agency, but that workshop's important. So I think even these kind of small aspects of how a vendor approaches the organization, not from ad hoc, it might be an ad hoc study, but that can build a relationship for your future as well. And sometimes it helps us from the customer end to build equity in the business, right? The right partner also makes us embed insights in the organization better. So it is extremely crucial for us to move from support to pivotal by choosing the vendor. I mean, my gosh, it's 50% of the game.
I 100% agree with Sumya, and I think that's my exact thinking. I mean, I've worked with vendors that I've seen the range, right? But in terms of data reporting versus storytelling, and I think that piece that Sumya really talked about in terms of the storytelling and the strategy and the kind of helping to bridge that piece between the research and the opportunities, the actions, the recommendations, rather than leaving it all to us to kind of go through and piece out, because our plates are full, our lives are busy. It takes a lot of time to do that. So I think the more that they can help to facilitate those conversations and those opportunities, and so that is a crucial piece as well for me in terms of really looking closely at vendors and what they're going to deliver.
Yeah, I think super helpful insight. Maybe one more question for Joe before we move to audience Q&A. Joe, if you kind of summarize one piece of advice, based on the breadth of organizations that you work with, if you could summarize one piece of advice to move from tactician to partner inside an organization, what would it be?
It's a good question. So, I mean, it's kind of the almost the topic of the talk as well. I think, what we're seeing, I've said it now, this idea of having a seat at the table, but I mean, when you actually dig deep and look at what that tactically means, strategically means, it's about, one, well, if we just loop together some of the things we talked about, right? Like embedding yourself in the entire insights process. So you're there. The really successful insights teams that we're seeing are there before the brief is created. If it's ad hoc research, they're influencing how that brief is created. They're bringing their knowledge of previous studies and research to the process of creating that research project. So maybe research from a different geography or slightly older can be reused, repurposed, and so on. And then they're really at the end of that research, heavily involved in disseminating it out into the organization. And of course, technology is not the only solution, but there are good technology solutions. I'm working for a technology company that provides very good solutions to be able to search through that content, stay on top of it so that you yourself as the insights team are really aware of what you've created, what you've worked on, and can then proactively be sourcing it out to the stakeholders within the business.
Great answer. Great answer. Seth, when you're ready to come back on, I think we're ready for our audience Q&A. And there we go. Nice look at the keyboard. Better look at your face. Go for it, Seth.
See now, Rick, that's behind the scenes. Not everybody saw that. That's your privileged position as a moderator.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
So yes, we do. We've got a two-part question to kick it off. Okay. When you have a piece of research that goes against a company's current target market, campaign, product offering, etc., and that was so exciting for this questioner, that's where it ends. But I think it's, what do you do? So research that's outside of what we're trying to accomplish. Joe, did I see you get excited with an answer, or?
I was more laughing at the cutoff question,
Yeah.
the second part of it. But I mean, again, coming now from the perspective of a platform that's providing to these insights teams, I think that's beyond common, right? That something that maybe goes against the grain or goes against a given campaign, but that's your job as well as the insights professional there to surface both sides of the story. And if we look back to that idea of storytelling that we spoke about, I think it's about compellingly bringing that counter data point to the table. Mm-hmm. You're not going to make the final decision probably in the end, but you can be there to explain the context and so on, and just try to use that as a way to also iteratively keep your seat at the table for next time and so on, right?
Thank you, Joe. Samya, I'm seeing pretty, emphatic head nodding. So I just want to see if you have a thought.
I think it is important to understand why did they use the research and why not did they use the research, right? Everyone is a respondent to a researcher. A family member, a person walking down the water cooler, everyone is a respondent. So I think it is important for us to understand that why did they not use that piece of research, but also not to table the research from an insight perspective. I know we go on from one research to another because it's a forward-moving motion, but sometimes we uncover things that happened pre-pandemic, right? What happened to that 2018 research? Was there something that happened in that nugget over there? And that's where technology really comes in play too, Joe. For us to not go through PowerPoint decks and Excel pages, my gosh, but to have it in a data cube already and compare and contrast, maybe it didn't serve its primary purpose, but you still did study consumers, right? You still study the consumer in that set. So it might not have delivered the story that the business wanted, but those are still consumers you studied. And I think understanding that is important. So why not, Joe? Why did you not use our research is also a nice research brief.
Interesting. Elias, did you have anything, or should we go to the second part?
No, I would echo what both of them said. And I think, Joe's point about really, making sure it's our job to surface those insights, right? So not just to ignore them and to make the compelling argument as to why they're important. And, I think in some cases it may not necessarily be counter, but it could be, just a different piece of the puzzle, right? So kind of understanding, okay, well, we've got this, they're somewhat kind of overlapping or conflicting, but let's look at the big picture and the reasons for each.
Speaking of that big picture, the follow-up is, how fast should you pivot your strategy around that data?
Soon. Soon. Business is not waiting. The story is not waiting. You need to pivot soon. And it's funny because my last statement that I wanted to deliver was immediacy. And my gosh, in the world of AI and generative or conversational AI, immediacy is such a big currency that if it doesn't work, you have to pivot. immediately to figure out what's the next story that could help deliver the piece. In fact, there's a case study, gosh, Seth, that we worked on where the same piece of research 2 years ago did not fly at all. It's on the shelf collecting dust. But from an insight perspective, we did that piece of research again this year. And guess what? Maybe we were just ahead of our time.
That's right. Timing is everything. Last question here, I think we'll have to get to. I'd love to know how the panel determined success with the use of the information and feel great about the research work that has been done. So let's just simplify that to maybe metrics that help determine success and get you to actual ROI. Anyone?
Make it fun. Like, we're in research, it's a lot of fun. We're studying consumers. Like, I don't see a better, world. Just make it fun, make it easy and fun, quizzes, gamify. Just have fun with research.
I think Sumya spoke in the prep session a little bit about the reels, right? Creating those show reels afterwards. And that's kind of a fun visual way. And I think that that's super interesting. So, I think just really bringing to life the insights and how they were used, how the any kind of ROI that you can attribute to it. And I think, we talked a lot about this before. It can be difficult at times because sometimes that ROI doesn't, it might happen a year or two later. It takes a while to see the sales result or the impact of the campaign or whatnot. But I think there's, in the meantime, you can still build that ROI story, right? There's different ways that you can approach that.
Fantastic. Joe, are you adding to that? Or Rick?
Like, it's stunned silence at the call into the answer. That's where we're at. I love it. I love it.
Fantastic. Joe, was it just that you couldn't find the mute button, or are you still having trouble? Fair enough. I guess a parting thought here, if we're to remember one thing here, lightning round, Soumya, what would you say?
Ooh, push beyond the gray. No matter what gray you're seeing, push beyond it. Just try to get to the answer, no matter what it could be.
Elias?
Yeah, I think I talked about this before, but I think really being a champion of the voice of the consumer, I think is a great way to elevate the role of insights within the organization. And so I think that there's a lot that can go with that I won't get into, but I think, I'll just leave it at that. I think really being the voice of the consumer.
Excellent. Rick, we'll let you cap it off as the moderator.
Yeah, I think we've heard such great things from everybody on the panel today. It's great work, begets more great work. And so that's really a way to build trust. If you're delivering repeated excellence to the organization, you're going to build trust and build, kind of transition from just a order taker to a voice of the table and a strategic decision maker. And I heard that from Joe, Soumya, and Elias. So I think that really summarizes it.
It really, really does. Rick, great job moderating. Thank you so much. Soumya, Joe, Elias, thank you for participating in this panel. What a great one.